Hey there, deep divers. Ready for another deep dive?
Let's do it.
Today, we're venturing into the world of building codes, specifically Australia's National Construction Code, the NCC, focusing on the 2022 editions of Volumes 1 and 2, plus those housing provisions.
Yeah, the NCC. It's more exciting than it sounds, I promise.
Okay, so maybe not always beautiful, but I get your point.
That's exciting. It's the rule book for safe and sound buildings, but also energy efficient, sustainable.
And whether you're dreaming of building your own eco-friendly home or just curious about the hidden world behind those walls, this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
We're not just skimming the surface here. We've got excerpts from the actual code documents, complete with diagrams, tables, and those head-scratching definitions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, think of the NCC like the DNA of our built environment. It's the blueprint for the places we live, work, and play.
Love that analogy. So before we get lost in the weeds of specific clauses and technical jargon, can you give us a quick overview of what the NCC is and why it's so important in Australia?
Sure. The NCC is essentially a set of minimum requirements for building design, construction, and performance. It covers everything from the structural integrity of a skyscraper to the fire safety of your local cafe. And because Australia has such a diverse range of climates and environments, the NCC aims to create a consistent, level playing field.
Makes sense. It's like having a national recipe book for building. But we've got 2 volumes here, plus this housing provisions document. How do they all fit together?
Okay, so Volume 1 is the big picture, covering a wide range of building classes, apartments, schools, office buildings.
Gotcha.
Volume 2 narrows its focus to residential buildings.
So if I'm picturing myself adding a second story to my house, I'd be digging into Volume 2.
Exactly. And the housing provisions document acts like a companion guide to Volume 2, providing more specific guidance on those nitty-gritty details, particularly relevant to residential construction.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I have to admit, when I first started flipping through these code documents, I was a bit intimidated by all the technical terms and definitions. It's like learning a new language.
Yeah, it can be a bit daunting.
So let's demystify some of these terms. I'm particularly curious about a few that really jumped out at me.
Happy to break them down. Jargon can be a real barrier, so let's make them a bit more accessible.
Perfect. Okay, first up, shared accommodation building. Now, I know we all have a general idea of what that means, but the code actually gets very specific about what distinguishes a boarding house from a residential part of a hotel. They both sound like shared living spaces to me.
It is a subtle difference,
Yeah.
but it matters. Imagine a building with multiple self-contained units. If more than one of those units can sleep 3 or more unrelated people, or if the total building can sleep 13 or more unrelated people, then it's classified as a shared accommodation building.
Ah, so it's not just about whether people are sharing kitchens or bathrooms, but also how many unrelated people are potentially living under one roof. Okay, this next one sounds pretty dramatic. Water stop. It sounds like something out of a superhero movie.
Uh-huh.
How does this seemingly simple element play a role in, say, preventing leaks in my bathroom?
Think of your shower recess. A water stop is essentially a vertical extension of the waterproofing membrane. It's like a dam, preventing water from sneaking through those tiny gaps where the walls meet the floor, or around fixtures. It's that extra line of defense.
So it's like a silent guardian, protecting my bathroom from the insidious forces of moisture. I'm starting to see these building codes in a whole new light. All right, one more term that really caught my eye. Fire-resisting construction. That sounds incredibly important, but what exactly makes a building element earn that designation? Is it just about the materials used, or is there more to it?
It's a combination of factors, how those materials and construction methods perform under fire conditions.
Understood.
To be classified as fire-resisting, a building element has to pass rigorous tests that determine its fire resistance level, or FRL.
Okay, so tell me more about these FRLs. It sounds like there are different levels of fire resistance.
Yes, the FRL is expressed in minutes and measures how long a building element can withstand fire while maintaining its structural integrity, preventing the spread of flames and smoke, and limiting the temperature rise on the unexposed side. So a wall with an FRL of 60 or 60, for example, can withstand fire for 60 minutes while maintaining its structural integrity, preventing the passage of flames and smoke and keeping the temperature on the other side from rising too quickly.
So it's not just about stopping the flames, but also about containing the smoke and heat. That's crucial for giving people time to evacuate safely. Okay, last definition for this round. Occupiable outdoor area. What exactly does that mean? Is it just any outdoor space?
Not quite. The NCC defines an occupiable outdoor area as a space on a roof, balcony, or a similar part of a building that's open to the sky and intended for use by people, not just for maintenance.
So it's about recognizing that these semi-outdoor spaces are an extension of our homes
Exactly.
and need to be designed with the same level of care and attention to detail as any other room, especially when it comes to things like safety railings, weather protection, and accessibility.
And that attention to detail is what makes the NCC such a fascinating and valuable resource. It's about ensuring that our buildings, from the grandest skyscrapers to the humblest homes, are not just functional, but also safe, healthy, and truly livable.
Well said. Now, speaking of livable, I'm itching to dive into some of the updates and changes introduced in the 2022 edition of the NCC.
Let's do it. There's a lot to unpack, and I think you'll be surprised by how much thought and research goes into constantly improving these building codes.
All right, let's jump into the heart of the matter, those updates in the 2022 NCC edition. I'm particularly interested in the changes related to safety. At the end of the day, we all want to feel secure in the buildings we inhabit.
Absolutely, safety is paramount. And the 2022 NCC introduces some important updates in this area. One that stands out is the new provision for swimming pool access, specifically outlined in H7P1. This section deals with the requirement for barriers around pools, emphasizing the need for continuous barriers, not only tall enough, but also strong enough to withstand impact, and restrict access for young children.
Yeah, it's a sobering reminder that even a moment of inattention around a pool can have tragic consequences.
Absolutely.
These updated requirements really drive home the importance of creating a safe environment for children, especially when it comes to water safety.
And it's not just about keeping kids safe. The 2022 edition also enhances requirements for Class 10A buildings, which, as we discussed, includes structures like garages and sheds. Figure 9.2.6 in Volume 2 provides visual guidance on how these buildings should be positioned on the property.
Right.
To minimize fire spread, it's about creating those crucial safety clearances between structures.
Yeah.
To reduce the risk of fire jumping from one building to another.
I can picture that diagram now. It's one thing to read about those safety clearances, but seeing it visually really brings it home. And speaking of fire safety, I noticed an interesting update related to smoke alarm installation, specifically addressing the issue of dead airspace. What's that all about?
Great question. Dead airspace refers to those areas near ceilings or corners where airflow is limited. Smoke can accumulate in these spaces without reaching the smoke alarm. This update, illustrated in Figure 9.5.4, ensures that smoke alarms are strategically positioned to avoid these dead zones, maximizing their effectiveness in detecting smoke and providing those critical early warnings.
It's like making sure the smoke alarms have a clear line of sight to any potential fire hazard. A simple but effective update that can make a big difference in fire safety.
And of course, in a country as prone to bushfires as Australia, the 2022 NCC strengthens requirements for building in bushfire-prone areas. It references updated standards like SH Standard 2021 and provides detailed guidance on how to assess bushfire risk and implement appropriate construction techniques outlined in H7P5.
It's a stark reminder that we need to design and build our homes to withstand those increasingly intense bushfire seasons. The NCC is evolving to address these growing risks, providing homeowners with a roadmap for building more resilient homes.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears and talk about sustainability, because the 2022 NCC really steps up its game in this area with some significant updates to how energy efficiency is approached.
I'm all ears because, let's face it, creating buildings that are kinder to the planet and gentler on our wallets is a win-win. So what are some of the key changes in this area?
One of the most impactful updates is the introduction of revised requirements for insulation, as outlined in Tables 13.2.3, 13.2.5, and 13.2.6 in Volume 2. These tables specify minimum R values for different building elements and climate zones, essentially setting higher standards for how well our homes need to be insulated to conserve energy.
So it's like tailoring the insulation levels to the specific climate conditions of your region.
Exactly.
Making sure your home is cozy in winter and cool in summer without overworking those heating and cooling systems.
And what's particularly fascinating to me is the increased focus on mitigating thermal bridging in floors and roofs. Table 13.2.6J provides detailed guidance on how to minimize heat loss through those structural elements. That can act like little pathways for heat to escape. It's about plugging those subtle leaks in the building envelope to create a truly energy-efficient home.
It's like making sure your home doesn't have any drafty windows or leaky doors.
Exactly.
It's all about creating a tight seal
Yes.
to keep those energy bills down and that comfortable temperature inside.
And it's not just about insulation, glazing performance. meaning how well windows and doors prevent heat gain or loss also gets a lot of attention in Section 13.3. The 2022 NCC encourages using high-performance glazing that minimizes heat transfer, helping to keep your home cool in summer and warm in winter.
I'm starting to see a theme here. It's all about creating a building envelope that acts like a shield, protecting the interior from the extremes of the outside environment.
Precisely. And let's not forget about water conservation. The 2022 edition includes requirements for rainwater tank installation and water quality, outlined in SAH9D4 and SAH9D5. These provisions highlight the growing importance of using alternative water sources to reduce reliance on mains water.
It's about recognizing that water is a precious resource, especially in a country as dry as Australia. The NCC is encouraging homeowners to embrace sustainable water practices, which benefits both the environment and our wallets.
Now, shifting gears to accessibility, the 2022 NCC introduces some noteworthy updates that aim to create more inclusive spaces. A significant addition is the provision for accessible adult change facilities, outlined in F4D12. This provision recognizes the need for inclusive public spaces that cater to people with disabilities and their carers.
It's about going beyond basic wheelchair accessibility and designing spaces that truly meet the needs of people with diverse mobility challenges. It's about ensuring that everyone can participate fully in public life without encountering unnecessary barriers.
Absolutely. And then there's H8, the livable housing design section, which encourages considering a broader range of accessibility features in residential design. This section provides guidance on creating homes that are adaptable to the changing needs of occupants over time, whether it's a growing family, an aging resident, or someone with a disability.
It's about thinking long-term and designing homes that can evolve with the people who live in them. It's about creating spaces that are truly inclusive and supportive for everyone.
Now, I know we've been talking a lot about the big picture updates, but I think it's time to zoom in and explore some of those nitty-gritty construction techniques that often get overlooked, but are crucial for creating a well-built home.
I'm all for getting into the details because, as we've seen, those seemingly small things can make a big difference in the long run. So what are some of the construction-related updates that caught your eye?
Well, one that stands out is the updated guidance on masonry wall construction in sections 5.4 and 5.6 of Volume 2. These sections outline everything from the types of mortar to use to how to ensure proper structural support for those beautiful brick walls.
I'm picturing those skilled masons carefully laying each brick, creating a wall that's not just strong, but also aesthetically pleasing. It's like a blend of art and science.
Exactly. And then there are the updates on gutter and downpipe installation in section 7.4. These might seem like mundane details, but they play a crucial role in protecting your home from water damage.
I've always wondered about those gutters, like how do you know what size gutters you need for your house?
That's where Table 7.4.3b comes in. It outlines the required gutter sizes for various rainfall intensities. So you would consult a rainfall intensity map for your area, and then use this table to determine the appropriate gutter size to effectively handle the volume of water that's likely to flow off your roof.
So it's like tailoring the capacity of your gutters to the amount of rainfall you typically experience. No more overflowing gutters during those heavy downpours.
Exactly. And finally, there are updated specifications for timber and composite wall cladding in section 7.5. This section covers everything from fixing methods to moisture management, ensuring these popular cladding materials are installed correctly for durability and weather resistance.
It's amazing how much detail is packed into these codes. It's like a comprehensive guide to building a home that's not only beautiful, but also built to last.
Now, I know we've thrown a lot of tables and diagrams your way, and I can imagine some of them might seem a bit daunting to decipher. So let's try to make sense of a few more of them.
I'm all for that because let's face it, those tables and diagrams can be a bit overwhelming at first glance.
Let's start with Table 4.2.15b, which deals with dimensions and reinforcement for strip footing systems. Strip footings are those essential concrete foundations that support the load-bearing walls of your house. This table lays out the specific dimensions and reinforcement requirements, based on factors like soil type and the load they need to carry. It's like a recipe for a strong and stable foundation, ensuring your house is built on solid ground.
So it's like making sure your house has a good pair of shoes to support its weight. No sinking or settling allowed.
Precisely. Now let's look at Figure 10.5.1, which illustrates a really interesting concept in building design called borrowing natural light. Sometimes a room might not have enough exterior windows to meet the NCC's requirements for natural light. In these cases, you can actually borrow natural light from an adjacent room that has more windows. This figure shows how this borrowing principle works, ensuring that even interior spaces get adequate daylight.
That's a clever way to maximize natural light and create a brighter, more welcoming interior environment. I'm already thinking about how I could apply this to my own home.
And finally, let's decode Table 13.7.3, which outlines recommended insulation thicknesses for different types of pipes and climate zones. Insulating your pipes is all about energy efficiency and preventing those annoying problems like frozen pipes in winter or scalding hot water in summer. This table provides guidance on selecting the appropriate insulation thickness based on your climate zone and the type of pipe you're insulating.
So it's like giving your pipes a cozy blanket to keep them at the right temperature year-round. It's one of those small details that can make a big difference in the comfort and energy efficiency of your home.
Now, before we move on, are there any other tables or diagrams that have you scratching your head?
Actually, yes. I'm looking at table 6.2.1a, which outlines the required ventilation openings for subfloor spaces, broken down by climate zones. Why is subfloor ventilation so crucial, and how does climate come into play?
This table highlights a critical but often overlooked aspect of building design, moisture management. Subfloor spaces, especially in Australia's varied climates, can be prone to dampness and condensation, which can lead to mold growth, timber rot, and even attract those unwelcome termites. This table ensures adequate airflow under the floor, preventing moisture buildup and creating a healthier, more durable structure.
So those vents aren't just there for decoration. They're essential for keeping the underbelly of the house dry and pest-free. It makes sense that climate zones would influence those requirements, as some areas are naturally more humid than others.
Exactly. Okay, moving on. Let's tackle Table 6.3.7, which deals with the maximum stands for floor joists. It's got a lot of numbers and technical terms, but I promise it's not as complicated as it looks.
I'm all ears, because I have to admit, those floor joist tables always make my eyes glaze over.
Think of floor joists as the backbone of your floor structure. They span between supporting beams or walls to create the framework for your floorboards. This table sets limits on how far those joists can span without additional support, based on the type of timber, its strength grade, and the load the floor is expected to carry.
So it's like making sure the floor is strong enough to handle all the furniture, people, and yes, even those dance parties we might be planning.
Exactly, you got it.
Yeah.
Now let's take a look at Table 7.2.7, which lists the fastener and fixing frequency for metal roof flashings and cappings. It might seem like overkill, but this level of detail is crucial for ensuring your roof stays watertight.
I'm intrigued because roof leaks are definitely something I want to avoid. So why is this table so important?
Roof flashings and cappings are those crucial metal components that prevent water from seeping into your roof at vulnerable points, like valleys, chimneys, or skylights. Table 7.2.7 ensures those flashings are securely fastened to withstand wind uplift, heavy rain, and the test of time. It's about preventing those leaks that can lead to costly repairs and structural damage down the road.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like making sure the armor of your roof is strong enough to withstand any weather attack.
Now let's move on to Figure 7.3.2c, which illustrates the minimum fixing requirements for roof tiles. It seems like a relatively straightforward diagram, but what are some of the key takeaways for someone looking at it for the first time?
I'm looking at the diagram now, and it seems to show a specific pattern for attaching those tiles.
You're right. This diagram emphasizes a fundamental principle of roof construction, secure attachment. It shows the minimum number of fixings required for each tile, ensuring they stay put even in strong winds. The diagram also highlights the importance of fixing tiles along the edges and ridges of the roof, as these areas are particularly vulnerable to wind uplift.
So it's not just about randomly nailing down tiles. There's a strategic pattern to those fixings, designed to maximize the roof's resistance to wind forces.
Exactly. Okay, one last figure to decode, Figure 11.3.1. This one shows the requirements for handrails on stairs and ramps. It might seem like a small detail, but it plays a big role in safety and accessibility.
I'm looking at the figure now, and it specifies things like the height and placement of those handrails.
That's right. Handrails provide essential support for navigating stairs and ramps, especially for people with mobility challenges, older adults, or anyone carrying heavy loads. This figure ensures they're strong enough to provide reliable support and positioned to be easily grasped.
So it's about creating a built environment that's accessible and safe for everyone, regardless of their physical abilities.
Precisely. And I think that's a great segue into a broader discussion about how the NCC encourages going above and beyond those minimum requirements where possible. It's about recognizing that codes aren't just a set of limitations, but a starting point for creating truly exceptional buildings.
I love that perspective. It's like seeing those codes as a foundation for innovation and excellence in building design.
Exactly. And that's where the NCC's emphasis on performance-based solutions comes into play. It allows for more creative and innovative approaches to building design, as long as you can demonstrate that your solution meets or exceeds the intended performance objectives.
So it's about finding new and better ways to achieve those desired outcomes, even if it means going beyond the prescriptive requirements of the code. That's a really empowering concept for architects, builders, and homeowners alike.
Absolutely. It encourages a more collaborative approach to building design, where everyone involved is striving to create not just a compliant structure, but a truly outstanding one.
Speaking of outstanding, are there any particular examples from these code excerpts that highlight how going above and beyond can lead to a better building?
I'm particularly drawn to the sections that deal with energy efficiency. While the NCC sets minimum R values for insulation, it encourages exceeding those minimums where possible. This could involve using higher performing insulation materials, adding extra insulation layers, or carefully addressing those thermal bridging points we discussed earlier.
So it's about creating a building that's not just energy efficient, but super energy efficient. It's like wrapping your home in an extra thick blanket to keep it warm in winter and cool in summer. What about you? Any examples that come to mind?
I was really intrigued by the sections on livable housing design. While accessibility is a core focus of the NCC, these sections encourage going beyond basic compliance and creating spaces that truly enhance the lives of people of all ages and abilities. This could involve incorporating wider doorways, step-free entries, or adaptable features that can be easily modified as needs change over time. Those are all excellent points. I think the key takeaway here is that codes, while essential for setting a baseline for safety and performance, should be viewed as a springboard for innovation and excellence in building design.
Well said. It's about embracing those codes as a foundation for creating not just compliant buildings, but truly remarkable ones.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit and dive into the often overlooked world of documentation and evidence of suitability.
Sounds good to me. Because I'm always a bit curious about what goes on behind the scenes to ensure that building products and materials actually live up to those code requirements.
Part A5 of the NCC is devoted to this critical aspect of building regulation. It outlines the types of evidence required to demonstrate that a material, product, or construction method meets the code's performance objectives. This could involve things like code mark certificates, certificates of conformity, test reports from accredited laboratories, or watermark licenses for plumbing products.
So it's about making sure those materials and products have been through rigorous testing and meet those stringent Australian standards. It's like having a seal of approval. That gives you confidence in what you're building with.
Precisely. And the NCC doesn't just rely on a single type of evidence. It allows for various forms of documentation to support compliance, recognizing that there are multiple ways to demonstrate that a product or method is fit for its intended purpose.
So it's about creating a robust system of checks and balances to ensure that the materials used on our buildings are safe, durable, and perform as expected. Now, one area of building regulation that often gets a lot of attention, especially in recent years, is fire safety. Can you walk us through how the NCC approaches this critical aspect of building design?
Fire safety is paramount in the NCC, and it's addressed through a multifaceted approach. It involves things like establishing fire resistance levels, or FRLs, for various building elements, specifying fire safety systems like smoke alarms, sprinkler systems, and emergency lighting, regulating the use of materials based on their fire hazard properties, and providing clear guidelines for fire compartmentation, which involves dividing a building into smaller, more manageable sections to limit fire spread.
So it's not just about reacting to a fire, but proactively designing and constructing buildings to minimize fire risks and protect occupants. It's about creating multiple layers of defense to prevent a fire from spreading out of control.
Exactly. And the NCC doesn't just focus on the building itself, it also addresses the fire safety properties of building materials.
Can you give us some examples of how the code regulates the use of materials based on their fire hazard properties?
Certainly. One example is the use of wall and ceiling linings. The NCC references standards like AS 5637 Part 1, which classifies linings based on their flammability and how much they contribute to fire spread. This helps ensure that the materials used inside our homes don't easily ignite or fuel a fire.
So it's about choosing materials that are inherently more fire resistant. It's like building with materials that are naturally less likely to go up in flames, giving occupants more time to escape.
Precisely. And then there's the concept of fire compartmentation, which involves strategically dividing a building into smaller sections, using fire-rated walls and floors. This helps to contain a fire within a limited area, preventing it from spreading rapidly throughout the entire building.
So it's like creating fire breaks within a building, limiting the fire's ability to jump from one area to another. It's about slowing down the spread of fire and buying precious time for evacuation. Now let's talk about energy efficiency. It seems like a hot topic these days, both in terms of reducing our environmental impact and saving money on energy bills. How does the NCC address this growing concern?
Energy efficiency is a major focus of the NCC, and it's woven throughout the CADE. It addresses everything from insulation requirements for walls, roofs, and floors to minimize heat gain and loss, to glazing performance standards to limit heat transfer through windows and doors, ventilation requirements to ensure adequate airflow and reduce reliance on mechanical systems, energy-efficient lighting and appliances to reduce energy consumption.
So it's a holistic approach to creating buildings that use energy more efficiently, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, and lowering those monthly energy bills. What are some of the key strategies the code employs to achieve these goals?
One of the core strategies is setting minimum performance requirements for building elements, like insulation and glazing. The NCC specifies minimum R values for insulation, which indicate how well it resists heat flow. It also sets standards for the U value and SHGC, solar heat gain coefficient, of glazing, which measure how well windows and doors prevent heat gain or loss.
So it's about making sure those essential components of the building envelope perform at a certain level to minimize unwanted heat transfer. It's like creating a tightly sealed, well-insulated home that's comfortable year-round.
Exactly. And the NCC doesn't stop there. It encourages the use of energy-efficient lighting and appliances. This could involve things like specifying LED light fixtures, setting efficiency standards for heating and cooling systems, or even encouraging the use of solar hot water systems.
So it's about using technology and design to reduce energy consumption at every opportunity. It's like choosing appliances that sip energy rather than guzzle it, making our homes more environmentally friendly and our wallets a bit happier.
Now, let's delve into a specific aspect of energy efficiency that's often overlooked, but can have a significant impact on a building's overall performance: thermal bridging.
Thermal bridging. We touched on it earlier when discussing insulation. Can you remind us what it is and why it matters so much?
Thermal bridging occurs when a more conductive material, like a steel beam or a concrete slab edge, penetrates through the insulation layer of a building element. These conductive pathways allow heat to more easily escape or enter the building, reducing the effectiveness of the insulation.
So it's like having those little weak points in your insulation armor where heat can sneak through.
Exactly. And those little heat leaks can add up, making your home less comfortable and increasing your energy bills.
So how does the NCC address this thermal bridging challenge?
The 2022 edition of the NCC places a greater emphasis on mitigating thermal bridging, particularly in floors and roofs.
Can you give us some examples of how the code tackles this issue?
Certainly. The code recommends using thermal breaks, which are materials with low thermal conductivity, to interrupt those conductive pathways. For example, in a metal-framed roof, a thermal break might be installed between the metal framing and the insulation layer to prevent heat from easily escaping through the metal.
So it's like creating a barrier between those conductive materials and the insulation, reducing those pesky heat leaks. Are there any other strategies the code recommends for dealing with thermal bridging?
Another strategy is to increase the insulation thickness in areas prone to thermal bridging. This helps to compensate for the reduced insulation effectiveness caused by those conductive pathways.
So it's like adding an extra layer of insulation armor in those vulnerable spots. Smart?
And the NCC also encourages using continuous insulation layers over the exterior of the building envelope. This helps to minimize the number of thermal bridges by creating a more uniform insulation barrier.
It's like wrapping the entire building in a seamless insulation blanket, reducing those thermal weak points.
Precisely. And it's those attention to detail and a focus on minimizing those subtle heat leaks that can make a big difference in a building's overall energy efficiency.
Well, I think we've successfully decoded another layer of the NCC. It's amazing how much thought and science goes into creating buildings that are not only safe and functional, but also energy efficient and environmentally responsible.
I couldn't agree more. It's those behind-the-scenes details and the constant evolution of building codes that play a crucial role in shaping the built environment we all inhabit.
Welcome back, deep divers. It feels like we've been on an epic adventure through this labyrinthine world of building codes.
It has been quite a journey.
But fear not, we're in the final stretch of our NCC exploration. I'm ready to unearth those last few gems of knowledge.
I'm with you. We've covered a lot of ground, from those head-scratching definitions to the nitty-gritty of construction techniques, but there's still so much more to discover.
You're right, and I'm particularly intrigued by the NCC's approach to managing condensation. It might seem like a mundane topic, but I know it can be a major headache for homeowners if not properly addressed.
You're absolutely right. Condensation might seem like a minor nuisance, but if left unchecked, it can lead to those dreaded issues: dampness, mold growth, even damage to building materials. So let's dive into section 10.8 of volume 2, where the NCC tackles this moisture menace head on.
Okay, spill the secrets. How does the code approach this condensation challenge?
Well, the NCC takes a multifaceted approach, recognizing that condensation occurs when warm, moist air comes into contact with a cold surface. So it addresses both the source of that moisture and those chilly surfaces where it's likely to condense.
And like a two-pronged attack, tackling the problem from both ends.
Exactly. For example, the code emphasizes the importance of properly sealing bathrooms and kitchens to prevent excessive moisture from migrating into other parts of the building. It's about creating those moisture-controlled zones to minimize the overall humidity levels in the house.
Makes sense. So those extractor fans in our bathrooms aren't just there to make things less awkward after a particularly pungent meal.
Exactly. They play a vital role in whisking away that excess moisture and keeping those humidity levels in check.
Okay, what about those cold spots where condensation tends to form? How does the code address those?
The NCC recommends using insulation to warm up those surfaces that are prone to condensation. For example, insulating exterior walls helps to raise their surface temperature, reducing the likelihood of condensation forming on those cold walls.
So it's like giving those walls a cozy sweater to keep them warm and fuzzy and condensation free.
You got it. Now let's move on to a topic that's music to my ears. Sound insulation. I know this can be a tricky subject, but I'm eager to hear how the NCC tackles this noise-reducing challenge.
I'm with you. Because whether you're building a home studio, dreaming of a peaceful home office, or just want to escape the noisy neighbors, sound insulation is a valuable asset. So, spill the beans. How does the NCC address this often overlooked aspect of building design?
Section 10.7 in Volume 2 is our guide to the world of acoustics. It's all about minimizing the transmission of noise between spaces, whether it's from one apartment to another, from the street into your living room, or even between rooms in your own house.
So if I'm picturing myself belting out my favorite karaoke tunes without disturbing the neighbors, this is the section to study.
Exactly. And one of the fundamental principles the code highlights is using materials that effectively absorb or block sound waves.
Yeah.
It often refers to the R-Belly rating, which indicates the sound insulation performance of a building element. A higher R-Bell rating means better sound insulation.
So it's like choosing materials that act as sound sponges, soaking up those unwanted noise vibrations. What types of materials are typically good at this?
Dense materials like concrete or masonry are generally good at blocking sound transmission. But lightweight materials like plasterboard or insulation can also contribute to good sound insulation when used in conjunction with other sound-absorbing materials.
So it's not just about the material itself, but how it's used in combination with other materials. It's like creating a layered sound barrier, each layer playing a role in absorbing or reflecting those pesky noise waves.
Exactly. And the NCC doesn't just specify materials. It also addresses construction techniques that can improve sound insulation, like using resilient mounts for wall and ceiling systems to minimize the transfer of vibrations.
It's those attention to detail and a focus on minimizing those subtle sound leaks that can make a big difference in the acoustics of a space.
Now, let's dive into a topic that's close to the hearts of many Australians: swimming pools. We touched on pool safety earlier, but the NCC also delves into the details of pool construction and water quality.
Because a pool isn't just about splashing around and having fun, it's a structure that needs to be built and maintained properly to ensure safety and enjoyment. So what are some of the key points the code highlights in these areas?
When it comes to pool construction, the NCC references standards like AS 1926 Part 1, which deals with safety barriers for swimming pools. This standard sets specific requirements for the height, strength, and accessibility of those barriers to prevent accidental drownings, especially among young children.
It's about creating those layers of protection to prevent those heart-wrenching accidents. It's a reminder that even a moment of inattention around a pool can have tragic consequences.
And of course, maintaining proper water quality is essential for a healthy and enjoyable swimming experience. The NCC emphasizes the importance of filtration, circulation, and regular testing to ensure the water is clean and safe.
So it's not just about keeping the pool sparkling clean, but also about maintaining the right chemical balance to prevent the growth of harmful bacteria and algae.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up our NCC expedition, let's take a moment to appreciate some of those seemingly minor details that can actually make a big difference in the long-term performance of a building.
I'm all about those hidden heroes of building design, those little things that often go unnoticed, but play a vital role in creating a well-built and durable structure.
One detail that always catches my eye is the requirement for gutters to have a minimum slope, outlined in section 7.4.4. It might seem insignificant, but that slight slope ensures that rainwater effectively flows towards the downpipes, preventing water from pooling in the gutters and potentially causing damage.
It's a classic example of how those seemingly small design elements can have a big impact on the longevity of a building. It's all about paying attention to those details that work together to create a watertight and durable structure.
And speaking of details, I'm always fascinated by the NCC's requirements for attaching decks and balconies to external walls. These outdoor living spaces are a beloved part of the Australian lifestyle, but they also need to be structurally sound and safe.
Right, because no one wants a wobbly deck or a balcony that feels like it's about to detach from the house. So, what are some of the key considerations for attaching these structures securely?
The NCC gets very specific about the types of connections, the strength of the materials, and the spacing of fasteners to ensure that decks and balconies can handle the loads they're designed to carry. So, creating those robust connections that withstand the test of time. And the elements.
It's those behind-the-scenes details that often go unnoticed, but are crucial for ensuring our homes are not just beautiful, but also safe and built to last.
Well said. And I think that brings us to the end of our NCC deep dive. We've journeyed from the foundations of building codes to the heights of sustainable design, uncovering a wealth of insights along the way.
It's been an incredible journey, and I have to say, I'm walking away with a newfound appreciation for the complexity and the importance of those building codes that shape the world around us.
I couldn't agree more. It's those codes that ensure our buildings are not just structures, but safe, healthy, and sustainable spaces where we can live, work, and thrive.
And on that note, we'll bring this episode of the Deep Dive to a close. A huge thank you to our expert guide for navigating this fascinating world with us. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a world that's just waiting to be explored.